talking about the learning bit, I only do a half an hour in the evenings for learning, but I'm very stuck for time because I go to work in the morning and I come home at 4:30 and I have to be in Mullingar by 6:30, 2 evenings a week. And the other 2 I have to be there at 7, and the weekend's time for painting then.
Do you plan it all in advance? Do you keep a diary or a timetable?
No, I kind of, do it off. If I come home at 4:30, I get the dinner ready or whatever, and then off I go.
And do you think you're better at learning in the evenings rather than any other time of day?
Yeah, I would because I used to do shift work, and when I done the shift work, I couldn't. It was very hard to keep the learning. But now that I'm on a steady day job, I find it better to learn in the evening time.
Yeah. Is that generally true, Ian, that people find it better to learn in the evenings? Or I know some are morning people.
Some people are morning people and some are evening people, and you'll learn better probably in your preferred time.
Yeah. Bridie, you have an interest in journalism as well. And do you find that reading the news in a newspaper is more rewarding for you than watching it on television?
I do now. But it takes me a little bit of time to read it because I'm a slow reader. But it's more rewarding now that I can read it out of the paper.
Yeah.
And I'm not reading all the time now,
And are you remembering it more if you're reading it from the paper rather than watching the news?
Yeah, and I would read slow and that, so to get all the information. Because if I read fast, I can't take it in.
Well, crime is something that's featuring a lot in our news, and these days it can sometimes seem that our society has more crime in it. Is it just that the media is becoming better at reporting crime, or do we genuinely have more crime in Ireland? Have a look at this and decide for yourself.
Crime is a fact of life. Most of us have, at one time or another, been affected by it. So it's important to be informed about crime in Ireland, and the news on television is a good way to do this. Orla O'Donnell is a legal affairs correspondent for RTE.
There's 3 bulletins on RTE at 1 o'clock, at 6:01 and at 9 o'clock. The most watched bulletins would be the 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock news, where hundreds of thousands of viewers tune in. You can also get news on TV3 and on TG Cahir, and 24-hour news if you want it on Sky News or some of the other digital channels.
Crime is a big component of the news, and it's reported in different ways.
Well, I suppose the main thing to remember about crime is it's newsworthy because it's unusual. The main way that reporters would report crime is you hear about something happening, you go to the scene, you would interview a senior Garda, you'd talk maybe to neighbours, find out what's happening. There's bigger events than others, for example, the disappearance of Robert Houlihan in Cork. That led to a long search and captured public attention because it was such an unusual event, and the disappearance of a child. There's other types of stories, for example, the riots in Dublin earlier this year. It necessitated a load of reporters going down to the scene at different areas of Dublin and trying to find out what was going on. The major types of crime, you would have, I suppose, gun-related crime. There seems to be more and more guns coming into the country, or people seem to find it easier to get their hands on guns. You have drugs-related crime, which again is probably related to gun-related crime, and 2 types of it. You've got people who are involved in gangs smuggling drugs and bringing them into the country, and who are trying to protect their drugs empire through the use of violence and guns. You'd also have a more low-level type of drug-related crime where somebody who's an addict would steal someone's mobile phone or their wallet to pay for their habit. You'd have some white-collar crime, I suppose, and that would be white-collar crime is a term used for crime committed by people who may be in authority, people who are supposedly respected members of society. And again, that's something that might come out of the tribunals, where you have people who've been accused of tax evasion or of taking money in return for voting a certain way. And you've got antisocial behaviour as well, which is not as bad but may have a very detrimental effect on people who live near where this kind of thing is happening, which is groups of people gathering, maybe drinking in public, maybe fighting, that kind of thing.
It is important for the media to have a good relationship with the Gardaí, and Garda Kevin O'Donoghue, as press officer for the Gardaí, provides that link. So how do they release their news to the media?
We release information to the media, news information in a number of ways. We do it electronically through email, so that's all TV and radio station, newsrooms, local papers, national papers, freelance journalists and so on. Occasionally then we would actually, as I said, visit a scene or manage the media locally, and then we'd send out a press release to the media saying that at a particular time, at a particular station, the press officer will brief the media and then take questions and try and satisfy their demands, but always conscious of the fact that we don't want to compromise our investigation in any shape or form.
There is also a huge media and general public interest in the release of Garda and crime statistics. It is also the press officer's role to deliver these.
Every 3 months we supply statistics to the Department of Justice, and the Minister for Justice releases them. Then every year we supply a full annual report from the Commissioner to the Minister. We have 6 regions in the country. One of them would be the Dublin Metropolitan Region, which is the kind of greater Dublin area, would be the busiest region in the country. About half of the crime occurs in Dublin. That's about 50,000 crimes a year, give or take. A 1% increase in the Dublin region results in an extra 500 crimes. Southern region, which is centred around Cork and Munster, the numbers of crimes down there may only be 15,000 for the year. So a 1% increase in the southern region is only 150 crimes.
If you get statistics from the Gardaí or wherever they come from about the number of crimes that have been committed, and there can sometimes be a perception that the crime rate is rising or the crime rate is falling. Usually the statistics will tell you that actually things aren't that much worse than they used to be, and so it kind of takes the hype out of the crime figures. It lets you know exactly what's going on. But it is worth being aware that these are unusual events, and sometimes people can feel afraid and feel that there's crime happening all around them, and usually there isn't. It's on the news because it's unusual and newsworthy and out of the ordinary.
Ian, some people think that crime is getting worse in Ireland, but do you think that the media has a role in that? Do some parts of the media sensationalise crime?
Yes, absolutely. Particularly there's a new type of newspaper has appeared in Ireland over the last 10 years that didn't happen before, and that they tend to portray crime in a very, very vivid way and to focus on the details of crime. And there's a very interesting phenomenon in the brain, in the mind, which means that if something springs readily to mind, like a crime, automatically you will overestimate how frequently that event occurs. Okay? So if there's been an outbreak of bird flu, and that's very much in the news, people will tend to rate it as being highly probable or highly likely that bird flu will happen. And similarly,
the more dramatic a story is, the more we think it happens a lot.
Well, yeah, because if it springs easily to memory, into mind, and that generally happens with more dramatised, more vivid, more pictorial things. So that's why one reason why things like certain types of crime that we heard there, particularly, say, child abductions, are actually very, very rare. Yet people perhaps sometimes overprotect their children by virtue of overestimating how likely that is.
Yeah. Well, Bridie, you'd be interested in this from your interest in journalism, but would you be interested in writing a crime story?
I'd be interested in writing, all right, but I don't know about a crime story now. I might
Fairies
for the moment.
Well, there are lots of times when it's more useful to use the 24-hour clock format. The Army uses the 24-hour clock, timetables use it. The handy thing about the 24-hour clock is that it leaves you in no doubt as to whether it's day or night. Have a look at this and see.
When we talk about time up to 12 noon, we talk about AM. After 12 o'clock, it's PM, or the afternoon. After 12 noon, this type of clock starts all over again, going round from 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and all the way back up to 12, which this time is 12 midnight. A digital clock is different. After 12 noon, it keeps on counting. So when it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the digital clock shows 13:00. You can add 12 if you want to change a time in the afternoon or evening into the 24-hour clock. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, add 12 hours and you get 13. Sometimes this is said as 1300 hours. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, add 12 hours and you get 14.
Your attention please, the following 16:30 services are now boarding.
Timetables usually use the 24-hour clock so that there won't be any misunderstanding. If your bus is leaving at 1700 hours, you know this is definitely 5 o'clock in the afternoon, not 5 in the morning. You can change the 24-hour clock back to the 12-hour clock by taking 12 away from the hours. So take 12 away from 13 and you get 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Take 12 away from 16 and you get 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Take 12 away from the hours at 21:20 and you get 9:20 or 20 past 9 in the evening. Take 12 away from the hours at 23:30 and you get 11:30 or 11:30 at night. When it gets to midnight, the digital clock goes back to 0. And then it starts all over again for a new day.
That's all we have time for today. We'd like to thank our guests for coming in, to Bridie Daly and Professor Ian Robertson. Thank you both very much. Next time we'll be finding out about dyslexia and getting some handy hints for parent-teacher meetings. In the meantime, here are those contact details to get hold of your free student workbook that goes with the series.
For your free student pack and workbook, free phone 1800 20 20 65. That's 1800 20 20 65. Or you can go online and visit www.rug.ie or write to The Really Useful Guide to Words and Numbers, care of Nala, 76 Lower Gardner Street, Dublin 1.